Disclaimer: the creator of Hekatonchrean is not liable for any damage or injury caused by the language, such as loss of neurons, mental breakdown, utter and pure confusion, stupefaction, linguistic disgust, sickness, spontaneous combustion, spontaneous transformation into an XCW space projection of a four-dimensional rotating tesseract, death, banishment, emotional scarring, spontaneous Greek chanting, spontaneous screaming, etc. The creator of Hekatonchrean recommends that you prepare the necessary brain space to comprehend this mess. Thank you, and good luck. Hello, Agma Schwa and fellow CCC3 enthusiasts. This is Hekatonchrean. In the beginning of Greek mythology, and I mean the very beginning, there was one thing: chaos. In my way of looking at it, chaos is a primordial deity that is as nonsensical as it is incomprehensible. Eventually, a bunch of other primordial deities emerged from the primordial void, the important ones being Gaia, the earth deity, and Arenos, the sky deity. Now, I actually don't know how to pronounce Arenos. I'm just going to pronounce it like that. So don't judge my pronunciation. You can if you want, but I don't recommend it. So, technically, Arenos came from Gaia, but I'm not going to be detailing every part of this ridiculous family tree due to the many different interpretations of written record. Gaia and Arenos had 3 sets of children: the Cyclopses, Hekatonchres, and the Titans, in that order. When their father saw the Cyclopses and Hekatonchres for the first time, he saw them as ugly monsters. So he promptly banished them to Tartarus, a deep abyssal dungeon of eternal torment and suffering. Meanwhile, the Titan Kronos decided to destroy his horrible father. For a while, the Titans lived peacefully and ruled the world as their mother rested. Much later, Kronos decided to consume his first 6 children out of paranoia, as one does. His next child was protected by his wife wisely choosing to feed her husband a rock instead of the child, Zeus. When Zeus grew up, he became Kronos' cupbearer. One night, he decided to feed a revolting concoction to Kronos, making him throw up all of his children and starting a 10-year war. Zeus then freed the Hekatonchres, and they in turn helped Zeus' side of the war. Eventually, when the Olympians won, the Hekatonchres were awarded gratefully. Keep in mind, this is a gross oversimplification of mythology. It's actually much more complex. But what language did the Hekatonchres speak? Oh, I wonder. Okay, before we start messing with abstract tables and trees and math and complex morphosyntax, we need a game plan. So we are going to begin with the anatomy of these Hekatonchres and move on to the phonology, then the morphosyntax and the grammar and the tones, and then I'll show you some of the translating process, and we will end it off with the translation. So, let's get started. I believe I forgot to mention this earlier. Hekatonchres have 50 heads and double as many arms, and they're also really smart. So we're just going to do some prereq here, where A is the Ackermann function, A1 of x equals A of x, A2 of x equals A of x, and so on. So for every Hekatonchre head, A of googolplex times x to the googolplex, it's that much times smarter than the smartest human brain, so it's very smart. And there are 50 of these brains because there's 50 heads. So due to emergent properties of the intelligence of 50 Hekatonchres, there are some changes. In practice, a Hekatonchre is infinitesimally smarter than a human. So they're very smart. Now, someone might ask me, "Hey Lewis, why is Hekatonchrean so ridiculously cursed?" And I will not say because it's a submission to CCC3, no. I will say it is because of the infinite complexity and intelligence of these beings. Shame on you. Now, I just thought I'd say this here because it doesn't fit too well anywhere else. This language has some inspiration from ancient and modern Greek, especially in the lexicon used in the translation. How about we start getting into the meat of this language with the easy part, phonology. M, m, n, 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 b, d, g, b, d, g, p, t, k, s, z, h, w, l, y, r. Oh wait. Did you notice that? Okay, here's the real phonology. This is the Alveolic variations of Hekatonchrean. So what's happening here? The best way to understand this is from 2 viewpoints. Either it's just allophony with the previous consonants mentioned, and they change based on the allowable vowels after them, or its phonotactics with these new consonants in this table and the specified vowels in this table. So I'll give you a second to think about that, but you might be thinking, which one is it? Well, it's both. Due to the thread thinking style of the Hekatonchreans, both of these viewpoints are true. This is called alluvialia. There are also these phonotactics right here and this orthography right here that conforms to the alluvialic variations previously mentioned. Also, whenever you see this language written out not in the standard orthography form, you will see you might see a vowel in parentheses, and that either means that the original vowel is right after the consonant or the vowel in parentheses is right after the consonant. Now let's get into the morphosyntax and grammar. Before we continue, I should mention the significance of this terminology as it appears frequently. So, head just has its standard linguistic meaning, and auxiliary is the opposite of head. Everything that is said in Hekatonchrean is split into chunks, clauses, and voices. Each clause has a couple of voices that correspond to a Hekatonchrean tree, not a syntax tree, and a chunk is an arbitrary collection of clauses. The language has a couple grammatical classes as well. These are primarily categorized into concepts, markers, and chaotic utterances beyond human comprehension. Concepts are divided into action concepts and normal concepts, and I'll explain the other two in further detail later. Concepts are also divided into oxemes and inflectional auxiliaries, or infloxes. Oxemes are singular words, and infloxes are combinations of two different concepts into one word. Every concept is either an inflox or an oxeme, and all names are infloxes. So let's say we have this tree here, and we want to see how to organize it with two voices. Keep in mind this is a simplification. If B is an inflox, then we will combine it with A and leave voice 2 blank. If B is not an inflox, even if A is 1, then each part of the tree will get its respective voice. This tree can be applied to any other one that is in Hekatonchrean. Onto the word order, it isn't SVO, SOV, OVS, or anything else normal. Here it is, where parentheses denote the optionality of a part only for a clause, and SP means the subject phrase, and AP means the action phrase. These roughly correspond to the subject and verb of a normal sentence. But you might be asking where the object is. It is not here. All the sentences in this language are non-transitive, and transitive behavior is mimicked by using two different clauses where one has an agent action and one has a patient action. Remember how I said I would show you markers? Well, now I am. I will show you CBHEs later. Markers describe a couple things, whether a word is head or auxiliary, whether it's an oxeme or an inflox, or whether it's an SP or an AP, and they're commonly written like this. Also note these anomalies about prepositions, conjunctions, and pronouns. Prepositions and conjunctions are simulated with actions, specifically patient actions. Usually these prepositional phrases are put in separate clauses, where the subject phrase is the object of the prepositional phrase, and the action phrase is the patient preposition. These can be integrated into a singular clause if the prepositional phrase is small and simple. Pronouns are also weird. Due to the fact that there is only the third person in this language, pronouns are not commonly used. However, when they need to be used, like in the translation text 2, they are simulated with the word unknown, with no vocativity for third person and vocativity for second person. Here is some data for reference about this language's grammar. Second person is marked with vocative case, third is the standard form, and first person is not a thing. Clauses have politeness levels: impolite, transpolite, which is neither polite or impolite, and polite. There are past, present, and future tenses, and there are also perfective, imperfective aspects. Additionally, there are also indicative, imperative, and interrogative moods. This is the structure of a clause. As you can see, each line is a voice, and there's a head, the marker goes before the head, and where there's an auxiliary, the marker goes after the word. And then there's, as you can see, there's CBHCs all over the place. Here are some other things about morphosyntax. Only voices 1 to 20 are primarily used if speaking non-profane language, and voices 21 to 50 are used if a speaker is trying to use profanity. I am being serious when I say that. Also note that any 6 voices need to be utilized to say this, where each line is a voice. I'm not going to say it right now, but you can take a look. 2 other voices will be singing chaotic prayers and curses to Zeus and Aranos, respectively. Chunks will not be separated with CBHCs, and separation is inferred. The vocal splitter knis or knus is used when you run out of voices. You layer the voices on further, separating with knis or knus. Now, onto the tones and CBHCs. Tones are hard in any language when not speaking it as an L1, but in Hekatonchrean, tones are more than hard. Tones are used to signify more levels of connection between clauses, concepts, and stuff like that. And instead of the normal tone contour systems, Hekatonchrean details a specific Hertz value to say certain things. All of this is received with the following formula. So as you can see, we have this formula right here where f is the clarification factor and tone x minus 1 is the parent node. You can set f to 1.57 for a chunk connection or 1.2 for a normal connection. Tone 0, the top of the tree, follows the formula b plus o, where b is the base and o is the offset. And you can see some ranges down there additionally. Now, let's talk about chaotic utterances beyond human comprehension. These CUBHEs describe person, aka vocativity, politeness, tense, aspect, and mood, and are written like this. Also, we can't understand them as humans by definition, but there is a system to help the best we can. We know how to categorize them, but we do not know how to pronounce them, and we categorize them in two ways: chaoticness and alpha factor. Each CUBHC has one level of chaoticness and an alpha factor as well. So, as you can see, we have some chaoticness levels: chaotic, very chaotic, excessively chaotic, painfully chaotic, a bit too chaotic, and there's also the alpha factor right here. As you can see: snort, slap, grek, smeckrel, sneal, rod, gret, grit, flop, yell, fret, squag, squawks, cleft. I'm not even going to say the entire thing, but you can see the alpha factor right here. We usually won't use these in our systems, and we'll just use abbreviations that correspond to the correct CUBHC. Keep in mind that we need to add more CUBHCs to a translation to make the number of voices you might use even. Yes, this actually is important. And I did forget this in the translation text originally, so you might see two CUBHCs in one voice on the language doc. That means that there are actually two voices saying a CUBHC, so take note of that. Now, I am not a Hekatonk here. I am a child with a head cold currently, and I'm not going to actually be saying the CUBHCs. Rather, I will emulate them with chaotic screaming. Good old chaotic screaming. It's finally time for the translation. Let's begin with the division of the translation text. So, here is the translation text I am using. We will begin by dividing it into chunks. As you can see, I have done that right here, and with a little bit of gloss and basic rearranging to make it easier to translate. Now, I'm going to run through a quick translation of A, and then talk a bit about translating other chunks. So, as you can see here, we have A, and it's been glossed a little bit, basic reorganization. U will be represented with unknown, plural, and vocativity. We can have hark, aka listen, be there with agent. We can also have the CUBHC VTRFE. We can then move this to a tree. And with this vocabulary for the chunk, we can make a main division of it, giving us this translation, and there are also these tones. Now, I do not have time to make slides for explaining the entire translation, so I will leave this Google Slides universe and transfer the spotlight to the language doc to talk about the translation a bit. So, as you can see, we are here in Hekatonchrean's language doc. This is the translation part of the language doc. As you can see here, we have the division of chunks that was previously mentioned. We have a tree of chunks and stuff, and I'm just going to go through each of these chunks and roughly explain what's happening. So we've already discussed A. So moving on to B, as you can see, we have this tree right here. B is something. It's Agamashuya and his son Gusaba ruled. So as you can see, we have this. We have a CBHC here, agent Agamashuya and Gusaba, son of Agamashuya. We can make a main division out of this, as you can see what's happened here, based on these statuses, and combine all this to like 2 tones and stuff, and then there's C, which is roughly the same thing. As you can see, we've taken I think it's C something. C's it ruled. So we have it ruled, SP ox, you see unknown, it, that's for it, and then AP head, rule, agent, so it was doing the ruling, and Taft, NTAFD, and then we have main division right here, piecing all this together, more tones. As you can see, tone 1 BC, we have been combining B and C. B is on the top of the tree, C is on the bottom of the tree, using, once we've done all this, just we've created the translations for each of the individual chunks. We have to remember the restrictions, as I hope you've realized. So as you can see, we've done this little table right here with the voice count and the part and stuff, all this, and it basically says we're going to have a couple different layers and using knis for what we need to do. So we need to use 25 things because none of this is profane. And then that's just how it's going to work. It says how much of each thing is going to be in each thing. Putting that together, we get this. This is the bulk of the translation right here. Knis is never stressed in this thing because I haven't had time to go through and stress it, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't break the requirements. Then there's obviously those reserved things, chaotic prayer to Zeus, chaotic curses to Arenos, or however you pronounce that. I think that's necessary explanation for this language doc. Without further ado, let's get into the translation. Wow, this took a lot more effort than translation length. That was pretty short. I'm leaving a link to the language doc spreadsheet thingy in the description. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.